Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we continue following the emotional and challenging journey of the single mother, Ha-I-Ca, and the upright police officer, Hung, a story where love isn't built with roses and sweet words, but forged through tears, sacrifice, and quiet courage. The last episode left viewers with a deep, lingering ache. Hung's mother, a woman of pride, rigidity, and invisible fears, could no longer hide her disappointment and anger upon learning that her son had fallen for a woman with a past. She ignored everything Ha-I-Ca had done, never saw the quiet sacrifices she had made, and paid no attention to the sincere heart she gave to Hung. In her eyes, Ha-I-Ca was a threat, a mistake, an obstacle to the bright future she had once envisioned for her son. And in that confrontation, Ha-I-Ca remained silent. Not because she was weak, but because she understood, sometimes, silence is the strongest way to preserve one's dignity. Even though her heart bled, she stood her ground, no justifications, no arguments, no need for pity. She had long grown used to judgmental stares, used to society's scrutiny for being a single mother. But this time, the pain was sharper, because the one hurting her was the mother of the man she loved. Yet it was that very moment when Hung walked in, decisive, steady, and full of trust, that everything paused. He didn't yell, didn't lash out. But every word he spoke became the strongest shield a man could give to the woman he loves. He wasn't just defending Ha-I-Ca from hurt, he was declaring, openly and honestly, in front of his family, "This is my choice. And I will take full responsibility for it." A simple sentence. But it was enough to shake Ha-I-Ca's entire world. The confrontation eased. Hung's mother, though still dissatisfied, had no choice but to retreat, carrying with her a storm of doubt and private pain. But for Ha-I-Ca, that no longer mattered. What mattered was that Hung hadn't left her alone. That evening, the little home returned to its peaceful rhythm. They didn't talk much about what had happened. Instead, they gardened together, patched up the leaky roof, cooked a simple dinner, and sat quietly side by side, as if the storms outside had never existed. They learned to love each other through understanding, through silent glances, through handholds that asked for no promises. Their love was not a blazing fire, but a steady flame, brave enough to survive the wind. But the question remains. Is that little light strong enough to brighten the path ahead? Can they overcome it all, from the prejudices buried deep in Hung's mother's heart, to the old wounds still aching inside Ha-I-Ca? The journey ahead is long. But perhaps, moments like this, where they choose to stand together, where trust outweighs fear, are the true foundation of lasting love. Stay tuned for the next episode to discover what unfolds in the love story between Ha-I-Ca and Hung. And don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Do you believe that love can truly conquer all? Ever since Hung's mother temporarily stepped away to care for her granddaughter, a rare moment of peace opened up in Hung's life, a space where, for the first time, he could feel true freedom within his own love. No more questions laced with meaning. No more eyes heavy with expectations. No more words tearing him between two choices. Now, he was finally free to live with his heart. Hung still kept his habit of waking up early, when the sun was still drowsy behind the mountains. No sirens. No duties. No reports to submit. Only him, his old bicycle, and the quiet road leading back to the house where his heart belonged. On his shoulders now were no longer a gun or a badge, but something quieter, deeper. A silent longing to gather all the little things for the woman he loves. Hung never minded getting his hands dirty. To him, standing beside Ha-I-Ca as she worked the garden beds, or quietly fixing wooden stakes to support the gourd vines before the rain came, none of that felt trivial. On the contrary, every little thing he did carried great meaning. It was his way of saying, I'm here. I choose you. And I want to build this life with you, with my own hands. Once, Hoi-Ca looked flustered seeing him scrubbing the kitchen floor, his shirt soaked. She said, "You don't have to do that. I've got it." But Hung simply smiled, eyes glowing with silent gentleness. "But I want to. Because I'm a part of this home. I'm not a guest." In that moment, Hoi-Ca could hardly hold back her emotions. She turned away, pretending to wipe the counter, but it was really to hide the tears welling in her eyes. That little house, once a place she chose to run away from past wounds, had now become a real home. Not because it was grand, but because every brick was placed with the care and love of a man she once thought was far beyond her reach. They didn't speak much about the future. But that future, it was already being written, day by day, in quiet moments like these. Some afternoons, all three of them, Hung, Hoi-Ca, and Tony, would sit on the wooden bench by the porch, sipping hot tea. Hung would tell Tony stories about officers rescuing cats from trees, or night patrols in the rain. Tony would giggle with squinted eyes, and Hoi-Ca would rest her head on Hung's shoulder, as if, at last, after all the upheaval, she had found a place where she truly belonged. On a beautiful sunny weekend, as the gentle light stretched across the porch, Hung had a special plan in mind. He invited Hoi-Ca and little Tony over, not for any grand reason, but simply because he wanted to cook a thoughtful, heartfelt meal for the two people who meant the most to him. From early morning, he was already at the city market, weaving through the stalls still glistening with morning dew. He carefully chose each giant prawn still wriggling, live crabs twitching in the basket, fresh squid, octopus, clams, and mussels, all neatly packed in ice to keep them fresh. Looking at his arms full of seafood, Hung's face lit up like a child on his birthday, excited, hopeful, happy. By the time Hoi-Ca and Tony arrived, his small kitchen was already alive, the sound of running water, the rhythmic chop of the knife, and the fragrant hints of lemongrass, chili, and calamansi fish sauce in the air. Hung rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt, cleaning the prawns, steaming the crabs, slicing squid. Ca helped him prepare the spices, sometimes crushing a few cloves of garlic, sometimes stirring the tangy dipping sauce he adored. They didn't say much, but between them flowed a quiet understanding, the kind that only comes from souls who've already lived alongside one another for a long time. Tony sat in his little floor seat by the kitchen door, his chubby face and big round eyes blinking curiously at everything around him. From time to time, he babbled incoherent sounds, giggling when he heard crab shells clatter or when Hung made silly faces just to make him laugh. Hung didn't mind squatting beside the kitchen mat, watching the food and playing peekaboo with the baby. When Tony reached out for a plastic spoon, Hung quickly wiped it clean and handed it to him with a warm smile. "Here you go. Captain Tony gets his own spoon today." Tony was still too little to grasp the meaning of father or family. But through the way Hung gently held him, wiped sweat from his forehead, or fed him with his hands, Ca knew her son was being loved with something real. Something deep. That meal wasn't fancy. Steamed prawns, boiled crab, sweet and sour stir-fried squid, and a small pot of seafood porridge just for Tony. Hung peeled each prawn, picked the crab meat carefully, and ladled porridge into a small bowl to cool before feeding the baby. He did it all with care, as if he'd done it 100 times, no awkwardness, no hesitation. Ca watched Hung in silence. She didn't need declarations of love. No flowers. No rings. Because in those quiet, thoughtful actions, her heart was already trembling with trust. In the eyes of the man in front of her, there was no hesitation. Only a steady, gentle affection. As if he had already chosen this path, and would walk it all the way to the end. That little kitchen, filled with baby babble, clinking spoons, and quietly beating hearts, became the place where love quietly bloomed. A love with no need for promises. Just the unwavering presence of each other, day after day. At her core, Haicia had always been a strong woman, not the kind who boasts loudly, but one who endures quietly, like a supple branch that bends with the storm but never breaks. Life had tested her too many times, and each time, she wiped her own tears and got back up, walking forward on her own. Since choosing the path of a single mother, she had never once complained, nor sought pity. It was a brave decision, lonely, but intentional. To her, raising a child wasn't just about feeding and clothing them. It was about teaching through her own way of living, with kindness, sincerity, and unwavering responsibility. Even now, with Hung by her side, a man who listens, who shares, who is always willing to be there, she never saw him as someone to lean on and surrender to. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she wanted to protect her own freedom and dignity, so that when she walked beside him, she could hold her head high, not as someone being led, but as someone who walked with him as an equal. Each day, she worked tirelessly. By day, she cared for Tony. While he napped, she tended to the vegetables, checked the gourd vines, picked ripe fruit. When evening came, she cleaned and sorted everything into baskets, preparing for the early morning market. And at night, if Tony cried, she would cradle him until he slept again, often until late, only to rise again before the sun peeked over the trees behind their home. That little patch of land behind the house, though small, was where she planted all her hope. Especially the row of lime trees she had nurtured with her own hands. Each one tended like a second child, selecting the soil, mixing organic compost, stretching shade nets, reinforcing the trunks against the wind, everything done with the utmost care, as though she were cultivating her own belief in life. There were days of heavy rain, when she wore a poncho, waded through mud, checking each root, pulling weeds, picking away yellowing leaves. On scorching days, she donned her conical hat, hauling bucket after heavy bucket from the backyard tank to water the trees. Sweat clung to her brow, soaked her clothes, but her eyes still sparkled, as if she could already see the promise of a bountiful harvest. When the limes ripened, she picked them, washed and sorted them into neat bags. The large ones for juicing, the medium for fresh eating, the small for pickling. At dawn, she brought them to market and sat quietly in a corner, not shouting, not calling out, just arranging everything cleanly and neatly. Some passers-by stopped to taste, curious, then returned to buy more. Some bought just a few, while others ordered 5 to 10 kilos for their drink stalls, saying, "Save me some next time, okay? Your limes are always so fragrant." What brought her joy wasn't just the sales. It was the sense of being seen, that her efforts were recognized. Her belief in quiet goodness was being nourished. The strangers walking past somehow felt the sincerity in every fresh lime, in every soft smile she gave. And perhaps, what touched her most wasn't the profit she brought home, but the gentle words of an elderly woman who bought a kilo of limes, then came back quietly, slipping a few extra bills into her hand. "You live so kindly, child. Heaven won't forget you." In that moment, Haicia felt her heart lift. Lighter, stronger, and more steadfast than ever before. That evening, after work, Hung didn't head straight home like he usually did. Instead, he stopped by a small market near the neighborhood, picked up some fresh fruit, a can of the powdered milk Tony liked, and a few packs of the snacks Haicia once said she craved whenever she was tired. The night breeze brushed softly against his shirt, but strangely, his heart felt warmer than ever. He paused outside Haicia's house, glancing through the slightly open door. The warm yellow light inside cast a gentle glow over her small frame. There she was, cradling Tony on the hammock, gently rocking him to sleep. Her back was slightly hunched, her hands patting the child's back in a rhythmic lull. Her soft lullaby echoed faintly, like a breeze rustling through the leaves. Hung stood there, unmoving, not wanting to disturb the sacred stillness of that moment. Because he knew he wasn't just witnessing peace. He was witnessing life. The quiet breath of a home taking root in silence. When she noticed him outside, Haica offered a gentle smile and nodded for him to come in. No words were needed. He stepped in, placed the bag on the table, and sat beside her, letting his hand rest softly atop hers. Their eyes met, silently, but within that gaze lived an entire world. He didn't ask, "Was today hard?" He already knew it was, but that she remained strong. She didn't ask, "Why are you late?" She already knew he was busy, but still, he chose to come to her and their child. Once Tony fell into deep sleep, Hung quietly folded the small blanket and tucked it around the boy. Then, without a word, he moved to wash the dishes. Haica sat nearby, watching him, this man who had just come from a long, tiring day. Yet was still gentle in every small task within her home. No one taught him to do these things. He simply chose to, out of love. Hung never tried to prove himself as Tony's father with papers or titles. All he needed was for the boy to smile when he saw him, to reach out to be held, to fall asleep peacefully when comforted in his arms. Hung's love wasn't loud. It flowed quietly, like a stream weaving through every corner of Haica's life. It didn't ask for a name. It only asked to be present, every day, in every small thing, in every breath. And that night, when all was calm, he sat on the porch, listening to the crickets in the garden. He turned to look at Haica, now asleep beside Tony's hammock. He smiled, a quiet smile, holding within it one sure truth. This is home. It may not have started with me, but it's where I choose to belong, and where I vow to stay for the rest of my life. But while Hung was gently building a future, something else, silent and unforeseen, was unfolding behind him. Not far away, his mother had returned to town. Not with a grand entrance, not to his doorstep, but to a small eatery down an old alley, where she had arranged to meet Hung, the woman she had always seen as the rightful daughter-in-law. She hadn't come to talk. She had come to act. For her, her son's love wasn't the real threat. It was losing control. Losing him to someone beyond her plans. She believed, if only Hung hesitated. If only Hung returned. If only the right plan was set in motion. Then everything Haica had now could vanish, like a bubble in the wind. And so, while Hung gently placed his hand in Haica's, while he held Tony in his arms with honest tenderness, an old but dangerous scheme was quietly taking shape. Will the heart be strong enough to resist the invisible chains? Can sincere love triumph over the quiet manipulations of family? And Hung, the man who follows his heart, will he be strong enough to stand firm against the very first storm? Not from the world, but from the ones closest to him?
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, lại là mình đây. Hôm nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện của mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoài Ca và cảnh sát Hùng. Ở trong tập tiếp theo thì chúng ta cũng có thể thấy là cũng khá là may mắn cho Hoài Ca và Hùng khi mà mẹ của Hùng đi du lịch một thời gian thì hai người mình xin lỗi, không phải đi du lịch mà do nhà em gái của Hùng là Tiểu San đó mọi người, có câu chuyện đứa con nhỏ bị ốm nên bà đến phụ giúp. Thì nhờ với cái hoàn cảnh như thế mà Hùng và Hoài Ca mới có những giây phút bình yên ở bên nhau. Thì mình hy vọng là mọi người sẽ ủng hộ cho tình yêu của Ca và Hùng nhiều hơn. Như mọi người cũng có thể thấy là Ca và Hùng đã cùng nhau trải qua rất là nhiều khó khăn gian khổ, và con đường phía trước của họ thì còn rất là gập ghềnh. Mình hy vọng là với sự động viên cổ vũ của mọi người thì Hoài Ca và Hùng sẽ có thêm động lực để đến với nhau trong thời gian tới, và một đám cưới trong mơ sẽ diễn ra. Và mong rằng mọi người hãy đăng ký kênh cũng như ủng hộ cho kênh của mình cũng như Hoài Ca và Hùng nhiều hơn nữa nha. Cảm ơn mọi người, xin chào và hẹn gặp lại. Xin chào tất cả mọi người, lại là mình đây. Hôm nay mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện của mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoài Ca và cảnh sát Hùng. Ở trong tập tiếp theo thì chúng ta cũng có thể thấy là cũng khá là may mắn cho Hoài Ca và Hùng khi mà mẹ của Hùng đi du lịch một thời gian thì hai người mình xin lỗi, phải đi du lịch mà do nhà em gái của Hùng là Tiểu San đó mọi người, có câu chuyện đứa con nhỏ bị ốm nên bà đến phụ giúp. Thì nhờ với cái hoàn cảnh như thế mà Hùng và Hoài Ca mới có những giây phút bình yên ở bên nhau. Thì mình hy vọng là mọi người sẽ ủng hộ cho tình yêu của Ca và Hùng nhiều hơn. Như mọi người cũng có thể thấy là Ca và Hùng đã cùng nhau trải qua rất là nhiều khó khăn gian khổ, và con đường phía trước của họ thì còn rất là gập ghềnh. Mình hy vọng là với sự động viên cổ vũ của mọi người thì Hoài Ca và Hùng sẽ có thêm động lực để đến với nhau trong thời gian tới, và một đám cưới trong mơ sẽ diễn ra. Và mong rằng mọi người hãy đăng ký kênh cũng như ủng hộ cho kênh của mình cũng như Hoài Ca và Hùng nhiều hơn nữa nha. Cảm ơn mọi người, xin chào và hẹn gặp lại.